Some say he's a technical whiz. Some say he was born in Cornwall. While some say that he's on a journey. It's The Journey. And here's your host, David Hackett.
Hi everyone, another guest, and today's guest is a founder and CEO of their own company. They are an amputee empowerment coach, and they are also the creator of the AMPA method, which we'll probably no doubt discuss, host of the Mindset Athlete podcast, a TEDx speaker and author with over 15 years of experience in exercise, diet and mindset as a coach. They also are a two-time Paralympic athlete and alum of both Swansea University and the University of Chester in the UK. We welcome James Owen Roberts to The Journey. Welcome, James.
Thank you for the introduction, David. Thank you for having me on.
No worries. And to start, and I always like asking this, where does your journey begin? Now, I know it said it in your bio, but I want you to tell us.
Well, my journey starts 36 years ago. As we're discussing, it'll be my 37th birthday this year. Both my parents are ex-military. My dad is a US Air Force retiree, and my mother is a NATO retired civilian. So I grew up over in Belgium for 19 years of my life. So I've pretty much been immersed to multiculturalism from as early as I can remember. So my journey started there to get to the heights that obviously you mentioned in the introduction. Gosh, in my wildest dreams did I think those would come true? Probably not. And I'm being real with you and the audience. Did I expect to go to 2 Paralympics? I probably would have bit your hand off for 1. But for me, it's that humble beginning. The journey probably starts with my grandmother, very stubborn person, very stubborn lady she was. My family is probably to the core like that. It's if you tell me no, I'm going to figure out a solution to that problem, because back in the day I probably had something to prove because of the disability, but maybe to show to others that, hey, I've achieved all that, and probably the world is still my oyster in terms of what I would like to achieve. So the journey is still very much ongoing. What I've achieved in 35 years, gosh, for some people, they probably wouldn't maybe even realize that in a lifetime. So for me, that's a massive blessing, because it's like, well, you've achieved so much, and it's taken probably speaking to other people, writing things down for other people to kind of go and to contemplate. Gosh, James, you've achieved quite a lot, and that's only an introduction, but I've had to do a 2-page document of what I've achieved. And I went, wow, when I actually read what I'd actually achieved. But because I've lived it, it's kind of go, oh, no big deal. Oh, I wanted to do this, no big deal. But I think that is an element that I think people maybe lost sight of the journey. They don't respect it as much as maybe they should. And I think we're more focused on how we get from A to B as quickly as possible, and we don't actually enjoy the process. So be it that I work heavily in health and fitness, it's a big discussion point that I'll bring up loads of times, because people do not enjoy most of the dietary journey that they have. It's like, well, why did you start that in the first place then? So I think my family, I owe enormous amount to my family for the journey that I've had up until this point, and obviously may it long continue.
Yeah. So going to you as a child, it goes in your bio. You was a few days old when your mum was first told that you had dysplasia, and then after further examination, it was discovered that it was much worse than that, and that you had a small fibula, a small tibia, and no femur, and the radiograph who went on to say, you shouldn't be able to walk, let alone do some of the things that you later went on to achieve. Now, those achievements I mentioned in your initial bio, that is truly amazing in its own right mind. You know, being a Paralympic in the 2012 in your own, you know, in United Kingdom, that's amazing in its own right mind.
Well, I got to thank my mom in particular, because she never told me that until I was probably about, early teens, because I asked, because I was inquisitive. So I've got to owe a lot of that gratitude to the family, because it's like, well, okay, that's a setback. Let's not tell him. So now the ceiling that I can achieve, I set, not somebody else's. It's technically, it's factual, it's true. I shouldn't be able to walk. But if you don't tell somebody their own limitations, they set them themselves. So am I surprised I went on to compete at home? Even my own family didn't want me to compete in London. They'd rather me go into the media, but that's obviously a different story altogether. But for me, it was a dream. It was like, I'm going to have one shot at this to compete at home, because most athletes never get to compete at home games. I want this. And for me, it's enormous amount. It's actually behind me, but you can't see it. That's London 2012 on the wall. So for me, it's very, very important for me, even to this day, what we know over a decade later, because it speaks volumes from where I started to, I've got no recollection of that. I was a few days old, yes, that is, he's factually correct. From a medical professional, is correct. I shouldn't be able to walk because the bones themselves aren't strong enough to hold me up. But I've done it. I've done it anyway. So I think, well, I think people got to remember the mind is more powerful than you would ever imagine. It's just a case of we put limiting beliefs on ourselves of what we can achieve because of, it could be from an education standpoint, it could be our own parents, it could be our friends, it could be our colleagues, you name it, is somebody else's narrative that we're taking on board. And this is something that I do, especially in my coaching, is I get people to be aware of it. Where does this thought process or this thinking come from? Do you even align with it? Do you even agree with it? Is it even what you've created? Because this could be, if I use myself as the example because it's probably easier, that's a narrative I could have for 30 years. Oh, I can't walk. And you've got in front of you obviously what my grandmother said as well. I didn't know about that until before the COVID pandemic. So that's 30 years old, those sentiments of, hey, how is James going to survive? He's going to be in the wheelchair for the rest of his life. So if my family would have agreed with what a medical professional would have said 35 years ago, that would be my reality, because I would have identified with that sentiment of, oh, I need to create the behaviors that go along with it. Oh, I need to be in a wheelchair. To the point that before we come on air, you talked about obviously your family's from North Wales as well. And my basketball coach that I've got now, he grew up in an era that obviously disabled people weren't allowed in mainstream schooling. And we're only talking about 40 years ago, 40, 50 years ago.
Yeah.
To the point that my generation is like, that's a bit odd. I've always been in mainstream education, to the point that he's had to learn through street smarts, not had qualifications, and he's turned out to be, an amazing individual. To if I can do some of the things he's done, what's he now, about 50s, in another 15 years time, for me, as in like the legacy aspect of it, I'll be very proud of myself, because what he's enabled for disabled people in North Wales, because he wanted to have some sort of pathway when it came to sport to be successful. That's one way to be able to see from, and I'm going to get my words very carefully now so I don't make a mistake. When we're at practice or we're at training, disability is not even, it's not looked at. We all got disabilities of some shape or form, but we all look at each other based on our ability. How good are we in that sport? And that's it. And I think that's a wonderful legacy that disabled sport has given me, that it's given me a perception of viewing people based on their character. What can you give me based on your values and morals? I'm not going to determine you whether or not you're good or bad because of circumstances, because that's not fair. That's a judgment. So I think that journey of, gosh, what is it now, 15 years, has changed my life and completely flipped it upside down to when I started out in disabled sport, of the amount of things. I'm not gonna say some of these things because they are very on PC. But what is almost acceptable in disabled sport wouldn't be allowed in mainstream society. But I think it just normalizes it, and to view other people with different disabilities as, hey, we're going to give banter. It's just it's jokes, but obviously not. It's not going to get out of hand. So I think a lot of that is down to my environments, because I could have resorted to being a victim if I would have acknowledged what my grandmother said to my mother 36 years ago. If you'd have pressed me and said, did your grandmother really say those things? Not around me, she didn't. Never. I was surprised and gobsmacked when my mother told me that about 3 years ago. I was like, I would have never guessed, because she was the complete opposite. The sun shined out my ass, if I'm going to put it politely. But my grandma never actually got to see me to fulfill some of that potential I had in sport, because she died 21 years ago. So right at the beginnings of me starting to take off in high level sport. But if it wasn't for her, my mother, and everybody, all the coaches around me along the way, I wouldn't be here speaking to you today. And that's a fact. So we do laugh about this from time to time. I think my mother was scared to come back to obviously face my grandmother if she hadn't put me in a position to at least start on that journey. And probably a little bit, I was probably scared of my mother, because she backed me to high heaven. If this is what you want to do, I'm going to support you 100%, even when there was people that didn't support me. And that was some of that with my own family. For me now, there's that almost massive appreciation of what people had faith and belief in me, the very, the fledgling little flames of what could happen. And obviously that's the start of a journey. It's to what it is of me speaking to you today. It's a massive, big inferno. It's that what I was able to get from that little kindling. I owe it to obviously my mother, my grandmother. I did probably look towards the end of my career to the heavens and kind of go, you never got to see this, but this is for you. So for me, obviously my background, it was a privilege to represent Great Britain because of my grandmother and grandfather fought in World War II. So that's as close as I'm ever going to get to military service because of a disability. So it means a lot for me to wear the Union Jack. Maybe I'm not going to say more or less than somebody else, but very patriotic when it comes to that. So, but I think a lot of that stems from my upbringing.
Yeah. So you're saying about how it is, and I often, when I interview people, relate to certain things in my life to cross-reference. And I remember I always liked football. Now, that's the most common sport in the UK, and probably it's grown everywhere else. But I thought I couldn't play football. I lived in London for about 8 months, I think it was. And in that time, I had the opportunity to join a disabled football team. And I don't mind promoting them because I think they would like the publicity in some way. It was the Felton Bees, which was part of Brentford Football Club. Now, at the time, I thought I wasn't going to be good. I thought I wasn't going to be anything. And even in, I played a couple of games against other disabled teams and I felt good. Now, I was one of the older ones there because I started late, but I always had dreams of doing things like playing football or doing blogs, or I wanted to do something. So from what I understand now, you had a dream all along when you had these dreams, even though, you found out yourself, you couldn't physically do it yourself, but you did it and you defined those odds.
Well, I think for me, I was fortunate because my friends in school, primary school, elementary school, all the way through schooling were very sporty. So I have a little bit of an advantage because I'm going to say this because it's the truth. I was obsessive about it. I lived it. I breathed it. It's pretty much everything that I talked about from the age of, 5 years old up until when I probably started getting a bit more open to talking about other things. Maybe late high school, because family got a little bit annoyed with me. It was, the only thing you can talk about is sport. But that is one of the reasons why I was successful, is because I almost blanked out everything that wasn't important to it. If it wasn't moving me closer to my goal, it can go. So drinking, not on the cards. Smoking, not on the cards. Social life. I'm not very social now, so to speak. I don't go out that much. I'm not a party animal. So that's never been on the radar. So for me, that was what I wanted to do as early as I can remember. I want to be a professional athlete of some shape or form. Don't know how I'm going to do it. Don't know what it looks like, but that's what I want to do. So the fear of the uncertainty of the future, I wasn't wary of. I didn't care. It's like, I don't know what's behind door number one. It could be bad. It could be good. Don't know until I open it.
And, because when you're younger, you never, and even when I was younger, we never thought that the Olympics would come to London. And that's what makes it more defining, because obviously your dream came effectively more true when you heard the news that London received the Paralympics and obviously the Olympics. Now we know what happened the day after, which was sad, but it was the fact that that day, and I remember the day when it was London had won London Olympics and the Paralympics. It was like a breathtaking moment, and for that moment, I felt London had achieved something, and it's a once in a lifetime for most people, for our generation. It's a once in a lifetime. Oh, we've got something. We got something. We won't hear of another, and I'm not saying this in the harshest way, we probably won't hear another Olympics in this generation. It's like hearing the World Cup that happened in 1966. We're not going to have another World Cup for political reasons, but we're trying to be the next best thing, I think.
Well, that's probably a British stereotype, David, a little bit in terms of
that's what
a lip. This is probably, I think a lot of nationalities get stereotypes and they don't live up to their. So the Americans, you could say, brash, loudmouth. The Australians to a certain extent as well, but not everybody's like that when it comes to the personality.
Exactly.
Whereas some Brits maybe need to step out of that shadow of, hey, I need to just be humble about what I've got. Why? We don't live in a society that works like that anymore.
Mm.
We've got that bad boy 24/7. Got the mobile phone, the internet, and things like that. Of okay, I'm not going to paint it in a wonderful brush because it's not a good thing as well. But in terms of humility and things like that, in terms of there's one thing to be humble and to be gracious in victory and being the good sportsman and showing good sportsmanship, but it's another thing to kind of downplay your own victories, which I think loads of people do. In terms of, I made, I'm gonna just throw out a figure now as an example. I made £5,000 or $5,000 in a day. If you've never done that before, why wouldn't you dance on the table? But because of maybe you could probably blame schooling a little bit because it's like, you can't show yourself to be better than anybody else. Yeah, but you work hard. If you've got, I don't know, you're a straight A GCSE student. Okay, in England now numbers, so I'm obviously in Wales, so I can't remember. If you get high marks in your schooling, hey, you did the work, you did the hard work. Why shouldn't you celebrate your momentous achievement? But I think we get a little bit shortchanged by, I think, the judgment that other people are gonna take from external. It's like, you shouldn't really care what YouTube thinks, what Twitter thinks, what Instagram thinks, Facebook, you name, put it in social media, TikTok for that matter. That other person, do you know the other person at the end of under that username? Probably not. Their opinion doesn't matter. Whereas maybe these are the ones that hurt probably the most is obviously your family, because those are hurt to the core. But if they don't align with, and this is Alexa Moses said this, don't align with where you want to get to, their opinion doesn't matter because it's based on their own ideology that they're telling you these things. So for 99% of people that have never even tried to do what you were trying to do, so their opinion doesn't matter. So it's only the 1% you need to listen to. And if they're further along in their journey and they've done it, obviously you need to listen to them because they're giving you a piece of advice that might accelerate that progress. I think for me, the blessing of that journey in sport, there's loads of people like that, that I was able to cultivate and be around to a certain extent of, if it wasn't for people that had trodden the path before me, it wouldn't have given me the buzz, because it's like, oh, you've gone to Athens as an example in 2004. I want to go to the next one. I don't know how, don't care when. I want to go to the next one. And obviously for me, of competing in 2008 to 2012, they've just grown and grown and grown to the point, okay, Tokyo was slightly differently, but they are night and day to, if you only speak of athletes that went to games before Sydney in 2000, I've been fortunate to speak to athletes that went to Atlanta in 96, to the point that once the Olympics had finished, they were ripping out the village for the athletes, taking out the TVs, to a certain extent. Paralympics means parallel to Olympics. That's not parallel. That's a disparity massively. And that is what we're talking about 30 years ago, almost, in 2 years' time. Or 3 years' time, sorry.
3 years' time.
So it's come a long way to the point that now, if you want to bid for the Olympics, you can't just, we don't want the Paralympics. You take both. And I think Paris would be the first one. It's the same mascot, which is going to be a bit weird, but to get your head around that, normally there's two different mascots. But just to see the leaps and bounds in my lifetime of, we've only got to go back to the 2000s of, I started off in able body sport as a swimmer. I was in mainstream swimming. It was only coincidence that a coach approached me one day, I think out of the blue, and it caught me off guard. But have you thought about doing disability sport? I could read into what I want now. Or were you doing it out of the graces of your heart? Were you being malicious? Until I ever speak to that person face to face, I will never know. It could be one or the above. It obviously went for good, and I obviously went from strength to strength. But the point that I'm making, even 23 years ago, I look back down on Paralympic sport because it wasn't getting the coverage that it rightly deserves nowadays. Because I think most people in an ordinary society can relate more to a disabled athlete than they can do somebody that's competing in the Olympics, because the struggles are pretty similar in day-to-day life. Because what an Olympian has is obviously they're massively tall. They've got every strength that you can think of. What the ordinary person kind of go, well, I can't relate to you. Is you're not, you've got no flaws whatsoever that are recognizable. Okay, the athletes talking about mental health, I think is probably making them more human as a whole, because people can kind of go, okay, these people are no longer robots. They're not here for entertainment purposes. They do have a semblance of humanity in them, and obviously I was one of them. So I think where the athlete themselves don't do themselves a favor is we don't really have an identity outside of sport. It's all engrossed, all encompassing that journey as it's make or break. So I wouldn't want to guess how many thousands, if not millions, of people have failed on their dream of becoming a professional in anything, and what that's done to them as a result of, you obviously mentioned, for football is probably the worst of a lot, of how many people fail at academy football and think their life is a failure. And it's like, well, if you said you as David or me as James, I solely encompass as a footballer, yeah, because that's everything that I set myself out to. Of that was my expectation. It was professional football or bust. But who's to say that you couldn't be an amazing electrician, amazing plumber? What or I don't know, lawyer, doctor. Those people probably give more to society than a footballer probably ever will. So I think that the perception is skewed when it comes to that. I think because people obviously don't have a patience when it comes to a journey. It's like, oh, I need to get from A to B as quickly as possible. They lose sight of, enjoying it. It's to be enjoyed, to get from one destination to the other. I talk about it probably more than I would like to in my day-to-day job, of people's impatience, and this doesn't matter what age group, which is obviously surprising. Even the older generation have lost patience to some degree. So it's like, I think people need to get back to that essence of, effort, hard work, because it reaps rewards at the end of it, because you're reaping the benefits of a job well done, because you've put everything into it. Okay, it doesn't need to be 100 mile an hour zero, because that's an extreme. I think people need to kind of look at it more so as, hey, if today is 100% and 90% is tomorrow, that's not a failure, because 90% is tomorrow, 90% is your 100% on that given day. That's okay. You just alter the way in which you look at it, and keep going. And I think this is an amazing part of Martin Luther King Jr.'s one of the speeches he did. If you can't fly, and I can't remember the bit in between, you walk. If you can't walk, you crawl, but you keep moving forward. And I think obviously that's a journey. I don't know many people that can fly other than utilizing aircraft, but that resolve I probably had because of my parents. Hey, it took me longer to crawl, did it. Took me longer to walk, I achieved it. With an aid of obviously a Zimmer frame in the beginning. I've got a picture in this room of me with my very first prosthetic, and I've got a smile on my face from ear to ear. That's probably, I probably could go out on a limb and say that's probably my proudest moment in my entire life. People probably wouldn't believe that, but to kind of put that in comparison to represent my country, that's more of an achievement because I've defeated the odds. The making a Paralympics, obviously there's going to be an element of luck, timing, God-given talent, and obviously sacrifice when it comes to blood, sweat, tears. But obviously there's a lot more things under the surface, what we won't go into, that obviously comes with sport, whereas that is obviously going against somebody else's belief that, hey, because he doesn't have X amount of bones, he shouldn't be able to walk. Thus, I think I was 6 months old, I'm standing up.
Yeah. So, and I do like that. And then we will talk about, what you do now. And it says about you coaching, about the, as an amputee empowerment coach. And I love how that's worded. And you're also the creator of the AMP method, which we want to know. And no doubt I have got the information, but what is the AMP method?
I'm gonna probably be tweaking this anyway, but as we're talking right now, it stands for Adapt, Master, Prove, and obviously that probably goes back to the very, very beginnings of me as a kid, doesn't it? Because I've had to adapt to my circumstances. I've had to master things along the way. If I couldn't do something, I would always find a solution because I want to be able to do things other people take for granted. I think I was in primary school, elementary school, probably about maybe 8 years old. I was sitting on the side, and I don't know what Mum was doing at the playground, but she said to me, I could see you watching everybody else playing on the monkey bars, and I could see the cogs turning in your head. And that is obviously, it might have been younger than that. That's at a young age, trying to work out an equation as, well, I can see how other people are doing it with all their limbs. How do I figure this out? Got nobody to show me how. That's similar to me. How do I figure this out? That obviously nowadays is a mundane task because I can do that pretty simply. But at that young age, it's like, well, how do I figure out something that's going to work for me that I can then obviously enjoy my recreational time with my friends as like nothing is any different. And that's a mindset that I've taken in every avenue of my life. Obviously, sometimes I probably need to lean into it more than I have, because it's an amazing toolkit to have to kind of be resourceful in that way of, okay, this is a problem. What solution are you going to pick? Because there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of ways that it can be done. Obviously, just pick one. And I think because of the storytelling that we indoctrinate ourselves with, be it through schooling, through other people, our parents, you name it, we lose sight of that. And I did a little bit when I got older, because that's one of the reasons probably why I retired, because I didn't enjoy my sport as much as I did at the very beginning. I lost sight of why I enjoyed sport why I enjoy sport to this day, and why I enjoyed sport at a young age, because I loved it. I was obsessed with it. I'm not obsessed with it as much now, but because it's competitive, it keeps me healthy and things like that. That's about it. And I can obviously talk about other things, and I've got other hobbies and things that interest me. But I think that's part of the journey that gets skewed along the way for people, be it in early life, childhood, adolescence, into adulthood, because you're almost conditioned to, oh, you go to school, you get a job, you have kids, you retire, and you die. Pretty much, well, that's 5 parts of life. This is not really an existence. That's like surviving. Okay, if you were to read into that and you were very stoic, you would challenge that, because, oh, that's awful existence. I don't want to kind of go for being a child, going to school, get a job that I potentially don't like, to have kids, to pay off the mortgage, to then wish for being retired, and then obviously end up dying at the end of it. Okay, that's very morbid, but that's something that we can't change the end, but you can change the journey. And I'm not saying my life has been any much perfect, because it hasn't. It's been ups and downs, turbulent, and loop-de-loops along the way, but it's more towards the latter part of where we are now, where my problems have occurred, is because of, once I decided to retire from sport, I wasn't prepared. I didn't prepare myself for life outside of sport, and that is probably the biggest mistake, I won't say regret, that I ever made, because, okay, the beginnings weren't planned, but they were pretty much structured, and I had a plan. Okay, go to school, finish high school. I went to university more so for the sport than anything, and then obviously the ultimatum was the sport took over. Whereas now I'm very systematic, and I'm lucky because school and university and sport enabled me to become very meticulous with planning and structure and things like that, to the point that my coaches are complete opposites of each other. One is very, 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 very organized. You could almost say, I'm going to use the word anal. It's too organized for some people, and then the other person's at the other extreme, to the point that I've kind of gone, well, I can operate at both ends of the spectrum, and it doesn't bother me. So that's a fluke, because it's taken years to be able to see that as that's not right and that's not wrong. Either way, it's finding what obviously suits you to be fitting of that journey. Because if you are somebody that is very creative and does it on the fly and off the cuff, why should you bottle yourself up and put yourself into a box of, I need to be organized? Because that could be complete chaos for you. It'd be, oh, I need to get this done by a certain but I don't operate like that. I can't be able to create things as and when they come. I can't be able to create something based off a conversation, because I don't know when that conversation is going to happen. If I need it to be, for example, as we're recording on a Thursday, 5th of January, if it needed to be today, but I don't operate like that, that'd be very, very difficult to sit down for an hour to be able to write something, because the juices aren't flowing. So the point is, with that, obviously there's a learning curve of what makes you unique as an individual, and obviously that's a journey from beginning to end that we're going to evolve, we're going to change. I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago. I'm not the same person I was 10 years ago. And there's learning blocks from who I was 10 years ago that I'd use today, because they're massive skill sets that made me successful in sport. But there's others that I probably could utilize that are more impactful of resourcefulness of 30 years ago, because being able to overcome medical diagnosis is probably a massive overcoming of adversity. And I think where people need to lean into is looking more at, instead of creating, obviously we're at the beginning of the year, New Year's resolutions is New Year's, what's the word I want to use? Intentions. What is exactly you want to achieve when? Where, as opposed to having good intentions, I'd like to lose weight. I'd like to have the top rated podcast. Those are vague. Why is it important for you to achieve all those? And obviously these are all deep questions of, I think people are starting to ask themselves, because they're being more open to, meditation, mindfulness, all these things that are very out there. But when it comes to, obviously, Eastern philosophy, it's a journey. If I can get to know what really makes me unique to myself, I know myself, thus I know how to be able to help other people. And I think when people are better at being that, they become more patient, because they're able to sit with their thoughts, to be able to sit with things that potentially aren't good, bad, or indifferent. And what I mean by that, David, is I think people set expectations that are too high for themselves or unrealistic, because, I need to do this. But you've not set parameters as why. Why is it important for you to achieve X, Y, Z? So there's no emotional attachment towards what you want to achieve. Thus, the journey is not going to be very, very, very pleasant, because I'm doing, say, losing weight because somebody told me that I need to lose weight. You're already begrudging that person anyway, because it's like, I need to prove that person that I'm this, that, and the other. Whereas you're not doing it for yourself. Whereas people need to remind, the journey needs to be for themselves, needs to be enjoyable. I think for me, going back to the sporting days, that is something that I wish I would have done differently, because I didn't care if it was something that I enjoyed. I didn't care if I hated it. It didn't matter if it was somewhere in between. I just kind of went teetering along in what I call being mediocre now, because it hurts when you say people are mediocre. But you're just surviving. You're not actually enjoying. You're not thriving. You're not learning from what. If I want to go really out there, the universe is trying to teach you, because there's learning curves. And I did speak to a younger athlete about 18 months ago. So about, like, almost talking to myself 20 years ago. And he said the exact same thing. And I went, no, stop. Let me stop you there. There's one thing you're going to learn from me today that you're going to be able to take going forward into your life, is if you like it, that's wonderful. What can it teach you? If you're not enjoying it, why not? And what can you learn from other people? Because that's the definite one that is something you're going to learn a lot from, is the negativity. Because if you could not focus 100% on the bad, but what you can learn to do differently, you might negate some of the good that was there, because it's not very good. I'll focus on the bad. The bad was 10 times worse than it actually was. Was it really? And then obviously the one in between of, like, blasé. Don't do that, because ultimately, if you're just going through life skating by, not really. It's you're on a trajectory, on a hiding at the end, because obviously that's somebody who's going to have regrets at the end. I wish I'd have done things differently. But here's your opportunity to do it now, by reassessing things and reflecting on, maybe I was a bit too harsh on myself in that scenario. Maybe there are wins to take from that. setback. I'm not a failure. The circumstance failed me. And to look at things from a different perspective, almost looking as if somebody else is looking at your life from 30,000 feet and looking at the bigger picture as, what am I wanting to achieve? And this is probably the most difficult questions people will be asked, is what do you want to achieve in 5 years? I used to hate that question. But Pat Flynn has done it's for entrepreneur podcast, Smart Passive Income, and he broke it down. I can't remember the name of the book, so I apologize. So I might have to email it to you, David, so people can actually get access to it. But in this book, it broke down the goals from, what is it the person wanting to achieve? What does that look like in 5 years' time? What does that look like in a year's time? What does that look like in a month's time? What does that look like today? What does that look like to now? And I think what people get obsessed on is they focus too much on the outcome, the result, or where they're wanting to get to. And this is why the journey is so difficult, because, and I was speaking to a gentleman before we came on the podcast. His goal was obviously quite substantial that he wanted to lose, and he was focusing on that. But if you focus on a big number, you would agree, David, you would get overwhelmed, because it's like, okay, in this instance, it's 3 numbers. If I was to use a financial one of, if you wanted to run a 6-figure business, 5 zeros, 6 zeros is intimidating, because it's like, oh, I've never done this before. And this is, I think, an obsession of people got at present. If you're not running a 6-figure, it's a 7-figure business. But why? Because everybody's doing it. But why is it important to you? And when I heard that, I was like, yeah, you got a point. Why did James want to do that? Do I really want to do that? Would I be happy with upwards of 5, not 5 figures, 6 figures, but 99000 instead of a million? Because we only got to look at The Simpsons as a cult animation. Montgomery Burns is a miserable guy, very wealthy. There is a consequence of that. Of you could be wealthy and be very unhappy. The wealthy person would want to be happy. People that are unhappy, I think it's this almost misconception with money. Money makes you happy. It's like, not really. It makes the world go round. But is an objection of happiness? Probably not. It's probably caused more misery than people would probably imagine. But it enables you to do more things. I'm not going to dispute that. Whereas where I've reassessed my goals for this year in 2023 alone, it's like, why do you want to achieve this? What if your goal is this? What would be the stretch? What would be something that's going to make you really, really sweat? And for me, obviously speaking with my coach, I was very, very deep thoughted in this because I don't know. Because I don't know what I don't know. In terms of my goal of what the actual goal is the same as it was last year. I didn't reach the one last year, but I know why. Because I was more focused on the money, which is very bad. In some cases, I'm not saying if that's your goal, you want to make more money. Obviously, that's fair enough. But if you're more of an emotive person like I am, there's no motivation there. It's like, oh, it's a number on a spreadsheet. Doesn't mean anything. So it shouldn't dictate my emotions. But it was. Oh, if I have a bad month, oh, I'm crap. I mustn't be doing my job properly. Could be numerous factors. The person in front of me is the wrong person. their goals aren't aligned with right now. They might say they are, but they might be better suited in 3 to 6 months to a year's time from actually doing the goal, and they would actually be really, really, I won't say dedicated. They would stop at nothing to get their goal, which, because I did a video before the new year on how to make New Year's resolutions last, and I was surprised that only 8% of people actually realized their goals. I thought it was far higher than that. But what the 8%ers do is their goal is that important to them that they'll stop at nothing to get it. And obviously, I didn't want to. There's an extreme with that, but I think for me in sport, I can see relatability to me as a 15, 16-year-old. I probably would have run through my way. David, I'm going to give you a choice here. You can step aside and get out my way, or I'm going to steamroll you. And I wouldn't say that to people, but obviously that would be physically what I would have done. As in, you're in my way. I'm giving you two options. I'd probably get you to pick the smarter one and get out of the way. But if you're still in the way, I'm coming straight through you, because that's the straightest. The straightest line is a straight line, and obviously you're in the way. So some of those things I discussed on that masterclass, I wasn't surprised, because most of that is common sense. But I think for us being very smart individuals, we don't have a lot of common sense and don't think of things to be simple. We have this obsession. It needs to be more difficult than it is. And if it's too simple, oh God, it can't be that easy. Oh, it's got to be more difficult than that. But if you looked at consistency and repetitions, is doing something over and over again. Einstein's good quote is, doing something over and over again and it being wrong is the epitome of insanity. The difference between insanity and what's good is a fine line. But by what's genius, Robin Williams, Einstein, Van Gogh, Da Vinci. There's probably thousands of people through history in terms of, they're geniuses. They're also crazy, because if you look at Da Vinci stuff, creating a helicopter in the 16th century. Where did he get this? Where did he get the idea from? Because it's not there. But I think those people are willing to test the boundaries of the what's physically possible, what's mentally possible. For me personally, David, I think as a youngster, I probably had a lot to prove to myself, more so. There probably was a lack of belief a little bit at times, and this is only because I've spoken to family about it recently, that I've seen talking like that, and I still do it occasionally now. I need to get validation from somebody else before I do something, which is wrong, because it's like, well, if you believe in it wholeheartedly, you do it despite what anybody said. If you believed in it 100%, that, hey, if this thing works or it blows up in my face, I'm going to persevere with it anyway, and whatever happens, I'm going to do it. If it was wrong, I'm not going to let the people say I told you so be right. It's like, I did it. You can't really say anything because I did it. You've never done it. If you did it, you might even make a failure even sooner. If I make it a success, those would be the last. It's generally speaking, this is what's so sad, is more people would like you to fail than to succeed, and it's horrible that, because it's like, and this is where I was watching. I think I implore people, if they don't follow Alex Hormozi, you don't have to like him or not. If you don't like, if I think he talks a lot of common sense. I thought it was sad that he couldn't go home for Christmas, because if he went home, his friends that he grew up with, they can't relate to him because he's we'll call it evolved. His mental capacity is expanding versus where they're at. They haven't changed in, I think it was 20 years. They've changed like 6 months, but changed 20 times. So like they've changed. You change every 6 months, and they've done it 20 times, but they've not changed much since the day he left. So he can't go back because they view him as a former version of himself, which obviously he doesn't want to do, because it's I won't say beneath him, but in terms of it's very sad to see that we have to break away from, be it friends, family, for our own good at times. It's very difficult, but they serve a purpose, and I think what's his quote of, some friends are there for a short time and some are there for a lifetime, and it's okay to let go of someone. I don't speak to some people I went to school with, whereas I used to think that was bad, but thinking, well, if I've got nothing in common with them and we don't share the same anything, why would I keep in touch? Because they're not communicating with me. It's like one-way street. It's like normally a friendship is, oh, how you doing? Happy birthday, Happy New Year. You'd want a little bit more than that, but my point is, if you are evolving as a person, those individuals are going to tear you down because, oh no, you can't do that. It's not going to work. It's going to be a failure. Between sport and coaching for a little, I worked in education. That's the most toxic environment, and probably maybe healthcare as well. Most toxic environments of people not wanting you to succeed. Because I can't remember the statement I said before I left. I said it was a stopback, and I mean no offense to the people that have obviously made it their passion in what they wanted to do, to teach and try and mold the next generation. I commend that, but for me, it wasn't all bad. I'm not going to say it was all bad, but for the majority, it didn't serve me, because it was everything that you did wasn't good enough. If you did things right by the kids, not good enough. I tried to help year group would it have been year 10 student, because they had to do a presentation to do around economics, and it's like, I can't present in front of the class, so I'm stage fright. I can't present to other people. Okay, I think everybody listening, you and me, David included, do not like to do public speaking. It's probably the most terrifying thing to do. That's why you've heard the one. You think of one person in the audience and they're underpants. I've never done it, but that would probably get you in a different state of mind, because you'd be humor or I shouldn't do this, but I see this guy. Or the other one I've seen it is obviously the film Waterboy, where he gets the coach to visualize, and the other coach is a baby the other side, which is hilarious. But I went out of my way to try and go, okay, you're using your phone to communicate with your classmates, be it Snapchat, chat, obviously TikTok didn't exist yet, and you're okay with doing, I bet you there's students on there nowadays on TikTok doing silly dances, not actually adding anything. You're okay with, I would go as far as saying, humiliating yourself on a public platform for humor, but you're not willing to do something that's going to help you in your education, and you have to do, otherwise you fail. I said, well, could you not record it? Oh no, sir, I can't do it because it's going to be judged. That's the only compromise you had. They didn't do it. I think they flunked the class. But I obviously went as far as this. Pre-recorded is easy. You can edit that thing. It's easy. Okay, I make mistakes. Let me delete out all the ums, ahs. It take forever to do that, but you could go to that extreme to make yourself look better than you would do if it wasn't polished. It wasn't. You'd go. That's what public speakers do. They practice to the point they know the story of the presentation inside and out, and they won't make a mistake. And that's patience. So it's scary to think that, okay, that generation is 20 years younger than me, is unwilling to use technology to their advantage. Because I bet you the teacher would have said, hey, that's fine. If you're willing to do it, the vice principal, deputy head, I don't know. But I think the teacher would have been willing to do it, because it's like, that's me thinking on my feet and thinking outside the box. Because people would be surprised that I was very, very shy and reserved. I hated public speaking. I hated to do in front of things. I even hated it as a university student, and that's only 10 years ago. To the point, I wasn't fear of being judged or being ridiculed. It was, is this thing going to be good enough? But all that it matters is if I make every point that I'm supposed to do, and it fits whatever, we'll call it interview stuff, you're going for. If I tick every box on that they need to hear, ding, 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 I've hit the jackpot. I've done what I'm supposed to do. And did I think it was good enough? It's never going to be good enough in your own estimation, because obviously you're your own worst critic. But that's something that you can obviously esteem to get better and better and better at. If you want to become a public speaker, obviously you're going to have to get better at public speaking. If you want to become a better podcaster, you need to do it more and more. And that statistics was frightening. I think if you make more than 8 episodes, you're in the top 5%. That's scary, that podcast, because it's not a lot, 8 episodes. But I think people get a little bit fearful, it's not doing very well. It's not getting any traction. Because you're not giving it a chance. I've done 275 episodes. But my whole way in which I do it now isn't about me. It's about what can I learn from the guest? What can I give to other people? What can I do to be better at titles? What can I do to be able to get hooks? What can I do to obviously that's skill set, we're going into marketing, but these aren't skills I had 5-10 years ago. Social media is a baby. 10 years ago, because I was busted.
It was.
Yeah, Facebook is only about 15 years old. Because I was trying to think of what was I doing before Facebook at university. I got it in 2007, so relatively quite early in the UK, because I went to school with a lot of Americans. But the whole landscape has changed. Sports people are brands. They weren't brands when I was competing.
It's the blue check mark.
It's you've completely changed. You look at, say, if you look at my social medias, Twitter's the only one that's verified, but because that was one of the ones that existed when I was competing. So that's verification. So if you looked at, say, the sports people that go to the Olympics or Paralympics now, it'd be Instagram. Who's to say we'll say, depends if it get banned or not, but if it doesn't get banned or not, TikTok might make the next one for Paris and beyond, because it's something that's always changing. And okay, I'm not a dinosaur, but I think as an individual, I don't know how old you are, David, but in terms of my generation, it was almost, they're two separate identities. You're one person in the street that everybody else knows, and you're a completely different person to your friends and family. And obviously that doesn't exist anymore. You got to be the same person. And it took me an age to be able to kind of go, well, don't want people to know everything about me. It's weird. Why do you want to know behind the scenes of what I do day to day? To me, that's boring. Why would you want to know what makes me, I won't say what makes me tick, but what I do behind the scenes? But that's what people buy into. They buy people. They don't buy companies. I think that age of, company to consumer doesn't exist. Company to company doesn't exist. It's person to person. It's the interaction that you and I are having that people want. It's the human connection. We're going into the age of, obviously, what's it called? AI, or artificial intelligence, and a lot of being banded around that my profession is going to be out of business. It's like, no. And I agree with a lot of coaches that are challenging, because we won't, because the information was always there, and it has been for forever, when health has been not through the form of preparing people for war or gymnastics. That information has been there probably since the 70s. The people are not paying me in that instance, and I'm not being vain about this. I'm just saying the truth. They're paying me for this, so they get implementation and they get a result. Okay, what's probably not helping the fitness industry is we still live in an era that pay per hour still. So the people's concept of it is, I need to pay per hour. Yeah. But what the gym doesn't deliver is, I can't have clients back to back to back, because I can't give you what you really deserve, which is, how do I get you to your result in a quicker time span that you would like? So say you wanted to achieve something in 3 months. If I got you in 2 months, you'd be happy. And there was one coach, I can't remember. It's a mindset coach, and I can't remember his name. The amount of what he charges for per hour, I think it was like £7,000 for the hour. But what he said, if I could solve your problem in 3 hours versus 3 months, would you not want that to be done? And you can't argue against that. If I can have my problem solved in 3 hours versus 3 months, I'd take the 3 hours, but it's going to be very, very intense in 3 hours. So if you're not ready for that in 3 hours, it's going to be the likelihood of you ascertaining and taking on board that information and actually retaining it is very slim. And I can't remember watching one of how you be able. I think it's Jordan Peterson about reading books. You need to write notes for you to remember the important information in them, not passive reading. Because I think he said that LeBron James was passive reading. You're not likely to remember information. But what I do very, very well is I hear it numerous places from different people, but it's the same thing, and I remember the information. It's exactly the same thing. So I'm not an avid reader. I'm not going to say I'm not a good reader, because that's not true. It's not that I don't like reading. I just don't. I shouldn't say I don't. I prefer to be able to take the information through the ears, because obviously you could do something, be it driving. You shouldn't really do this, because it's probably on par with smoking and drinking a beverage, because you're not really focusing on the road. But in terms of, you could do something multitasking at the same time. You could be at the gym listening to a podcast. You could be you could be doing, say, from a focus standpoint, if you needed to be studious, you could do binary beats. There's ways in which you can absorb information a lot quicker. I wish I knew this like when I was a teenager, because it'd be invaluable. Because I think the best piece of advice I've ever heard in my lifetime, it was from a psychology professor, as why are smart kids successful in school? It's not because they study more. It's because they study throughout. Coming back to the journey again, throughout the academic year, and when it comes time to revising, they're revisiting the information. And light bulb went off. I went, I'm stereotyping smart kids because I'm doing like everybody else, and I'm just revising. Whereas if I'd have taken the patience to look at the information every day, every week, the revision would be easy, because it'd be, okay, I know that, I need to look over that because it's not quite sunk in. To when I did my personal training degree, I did exactly that, because I did my not degree. When I did my personal training certificate, because I'd done a degree before in sports science, a lot of what I was seeing I'd already seen. So okay, I know that. I'm surprised I still know it. So I must have been paying attention, and that's being harsh to myself now. Thus, I only need to look at this. I got the highest grade in the class, and me being me, people were like, "Well, don't you want another question? You go wrong." Well, they can't tell me, so I'm not. I was a bit annoyed, but I was like, "I got one wrong, okay." But if we rewind back to the days I was in school, I would have chastised that person. Oh, that kid's he's smart, always in the books. Got no life. Whereas for me, sport was number one. But my school was the lines were blurred. Kids were smart, sporty, smart, creative, sporty, creative, the mishmash. And it's only the last year I went, well, James, the people are exactly like you. My parents hate me for this, because it's like, oh, I wish you would have done better in academics. I didn't. I wish I might have had it done, because I did a talk at a college in the UK. So what would be for the Americans? Probably 18 years old. I said exactly that. The kids, they loved it. Oh, James, I wasn't very studious. Kids, yeah. They'd go to that extent, but you could hear some cheers in the audience. The faculty, on the other hand, they weren't pleased. Like, okay, hang on a second. Let me go to the next slide. I wasn't very studious. I went to American school, so I got a B average. So bright, but not. I wasn't as bright as probably my family would have liked. Hang on, faculty. Did I do my postgraduate by then? No, I think I'd only done my undergraduate. So I went to university, got a 2.2. So I'm okay. I'm about average. So I'm smart. Not only that, I did what I wanted. I did what I loved. I think the faculty got what they wanted in the end, because, like, hey, I'm not condoning not being book smart, because it's a way. It is one way to succeed. And probably more so than sport, because it gives you knowledge and it gives you the opportunity to go any way, which way in your journey. So I would probably commend it to everybody to it doesn't have to be academic books. It could be something that you would like to learn more about. So for me, it could be anything now, because it's like, if I want to, quite interested to know this topic. Or it could be somebody who's asked me a question I don't know the answer. Okay. I better find out what the answer is myself, or ask somebody that does, because I'm not afraid to say to somebody, hey, John, I don't know the answer, but I'll find out for you because you want to know the answer. I obviously want to know the answer because I'd like to know it, and I don't. And if this question comes up, I can answer it myself. And then if I don't, I know somebody that obviously will, which is an advantage, because it's like, okay, I don't know. I don't need to go and find out. I know the exact person to speak to. Oh, so-and-so, I'd like to know X, Y, Z. Do you mind coming on a podcast? and we talk about it. So I don't help one person, I help hundreds. And I think from that journey, I think is amazing, because that's never changing thing as well. Because I've got a luxury now that almost every week I get to speak to somebody different, new perspectives, new journey that they've encountered, what they've faced, every upheaval, highlight, and my perspective might change as a result. As okay, I align with Jane. What she said has been impactful on my thinking, and then, or it could be, oh, I don't agree with every aspect of it, but one nugget I took away from what James said, I'd like to add to me to be a better version of myself. So I think it's that very much rolling with the tide, going with the flow of life, because that's what life is. It's a river, meandering river. You can only move it by obviously altering its course. But if you're able to actually enjoy every aspect of that journey, it's probably a very pleasant one.
So, to end and conclude, what would you say to people to be positive for the future in your own words?
Ooh, that's a great question, David. That's a great to be positive. I think you need to look at the word in itself, because what is positive for me might not be positive for you. What's positive for you might not be positive for somebody else. So it's all subjective, and it's very, very, very much one of how you look at it. Because if I say, if I go back to the very beginnings of the episode, you could say my life was adverse. Do I agree with that? For the most part, I didn't. Is my life of positivity? Yes and no. Is it uplifting to other people, motivational, inspire? Yes. So it's positive in that light, but it's how you view the future. So when you say positivity, obviously it's you could loosely use it in terms of good or bad. The one that I would like people to look at it is from of the future. You dictate it, good or bad. You are in charge today. So if you want a positive future, okay, it'd be wonderful if you have a positive mindset. But that's obviously, I'm going to use one of my podcasts because we talked about this now, but slightly differently. I sat down with Christine Myers for episodes. I'll use the title because I can't remember what number it is. It is what did I call the episode? Future Reservations. And she uses an anecdote of crossing a river. You could use, and this is a sport in the Netherlands, so go YouTube it if you haven't ever seen it, but they jump over the dikes with it. But she said it in the episode of, you could try to run as fast as you could from one side of the other and jump over the river. What happens if you fall flat, face first in the water? Failure, because you've not got to the other side. Whereas if you use this rocks as a stepping stone to get to the eventuality of the other side, your perception will change. Oh, today is not a great day. Okay, not a complete failure. A step forward. You only move a step forward until you feel comfortable with that statement. So if you feel quite uneasy, obviously I'd say either go watch it or go listen to it, because I'm not doing it justice. But my point is using incremental milestones, so little goals along the way, to, if your goal of positivity is unsurmountable right now, that's okay. It's because you've got control. Because for me and David, positivity might be something different, because we're a bit closer. So it's very, very, it'd be very judgmental of me to say, oh, well, just think like this, because if you're further away and you could be at the very beginning, oh gosh, that's so overwhelming, that's too difficult, oh no, I won't do it. So it's starting with baby steps. So taking whatever it is you need to do today to take action to move a step closer. So that's how I would view positivity, in looking in light of uncertainty of the future. Just take that initial step. There's also, it's a book, but it was also, if you were in the UK, this was on the television at Christmas, so it's probably still there. It is the Fox, the Horse, the Mole, and the Boy. And that is exactly the same thing. And that's obviously a kid story, but the moral of the story is exactly the same. So if you're in the UK, you can go watch that. I've heard about the book, and when I seen it as a television program, I was like, oh, I already know that. I already know the ending, so I don't need to watch. So you've got that ultimate, and then in terms of positive for the future, using people like I would probably listen to David's podcast, and I'm not just saying that because I'm on it, as one way to help with that journey, because I think would you agree, David, that your podcast is a journey? You're going to learn something from every episode.
Yeah, that's what I aimed to do. It started off just seeing how people's journeys compared to my journey. And that's how I like it. And that's how I identify on the journey, because I believe, and that's why the logo is the way it is because everyone's got a unique journey, and I like unique perspectives.
Yeah, and I think to add to what you've said, David, I think it brings things into perspective, because somebody's journey on your podcast might be harder than somebody's where they're at right now. So it brings people into, I know I mentioned mental health a little bit in the episode. It brings it into perspective of, okay, you might have anxiety, depression, or whatever when it comes to mental health. I'm not diminishing to say that's good or bad, but it gives you relatability to, I'm not the only one that's going through it at that particular pump. Thus, it opens your perspective in terms of, I've got more of an open approach. It's not just me, and I'm laser focused. This is what's bad about sports people now. I'll come. There's the single-mindedness, but when it's to do with your own suffering, this doesn't help you, because you get fixated on the problem, and it doesn't matter if somebody says think more positive. It's not helpful, because it's like, what do you think I'm trying to do? I'm trying to change the circumstances I don't want, which is not the most ideal thing to do, because ultimately that's not going to change. It's having acceptance with it, but it gives you the foresight to be a little bit more open to seeing the world around you, and kind of go, okay, the world isn't so bad as I perceive it in my own head. It's, as we're recording, obviously it's January. Britain's, I won't say miserable, but in terms of it's we've got people know Britain as being pretty miserable, dark, blah 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 blah.
And it's currently in a time of change because of what's gone on in recent months.
Well,
with the royal family, for example.
But the seasons are going to affect how you feel as well.
Yeah.
So you're going to be, most people have heard of SAD nowadays, of what is it? I can't remember the anagram actually stands for, but it's a syndrome because of the weather, and it's going to play a factor on how you feel, because you're not getting as much sunlight, you're not outside as much, blah blah blah. You're not overall healthy as you would be in the summer, because it's a little bit more enjoyable to be outside and socializing and things like that. So it all affects the way that you think. But if you can take that approach of using stepping stones as, okay, this is my goal, whatever that is, the other side, positivity, whatever your goal is for 2023, what do I need to do in small chunks to get that? And I give myself praise along the way. So obviously what I was talking about at the beginning of the episode of dancing on the table, don't have to literally do that. You can do it if you want to. You can record it if you want to do. Obviously whatever's going to make you feel best about that achievement, do it. If it's, I don't know, you lost 5 pounds, I want to have a bit of cheesecake. Okay, I've had it. Have a bit of cheesecake. As long as you don't eat the whole thing, it's okay. Or you don't let things get out of control, but you're giving something that makes you feel good. And it's not a reward. It's, hey, I've done something good. I'm proud of what I've achieved. Hey, David, good job. James, good job. Whoever's listening, pat on the back. Because it's something that we are not in sports, people say, because you could say you like football, I can tell, David. What's the first thing they do when they score?
They celebrate in ridiculous, and I say ridiculous, not just a hands up, thank you. Well, Alan Shearer did that, but they dance around, do different ways of
Yeah, but why? Other than they're doing their job, but why shouldn't they celebrate doing something well done?
And they're thanking their fans by doing that.
But that's something that we should do as a society as a whole. Hey, I've done a good job. I don't expect you to, if you're watching, listen to this in an office block, to go run up and down the aisles in your office, because people will be thinking you're weird. But doing it in a way that is maybe socially acceptable. I know a number of coaches, when they have a win, they ring a bell, like a win bell. But obviously, when you're not used to that, it's not normal. It's like, why are you doing that when you've done something that is supposed to happen? But inherently, one thing I do with my clients is that little win. I do it all the time. Oh, what's the one win you got from last week? And then we'll go to the bad. Okay. You don't think that is a win? It's massive. So depending on what it is, if it's like emotional and it's like, well, that's amazing. That's huge. And one of the clients I was speaking to this week, she's not faced adversity with the time that she's worked with me, but you need to lean into your weaknesses and how you perceive failure, because that's going to be helpful when you do face real adversity, because it's going to be able to help you in the long run. So I think if I summarize it on a whole for you, David, so people can get it, it's subjective. It's very much one of how you look at things. Because if you see your life as good and bad, a bit difficult, because if you and I looked at their life, but what about this? What about this? What about this? And I can't remember where I seen this, because it was eye-opening. I don't know why, as human beings, I think it might be in TikTok. TikTok's quite useful sometimes. Human beings, we've got this obsession of being happy. We're striving for happiness. But why? And it hit me when I thought about it. Shouldn't we be content with living life? Good and bad. so for me, take that how you will, but I think living life and taking the good and the bad, I think it helps you better because you're a bit able to absorb. Nobody analyzes for the majority. I know one person on my social media that does this. One out of 2,000 people. He analyzes the good and looks at why. I don't do that, or very rarely. Majority of us will look at the bad. But if we were to be able to embrace it and accept it as much as we accept the good, we'd be living. So there wouldn't be any positivity or negativity. It'd be, okay, this thing in the future is happening to me. Okay, what am I going to do about it? Yeah. Not go, this is happening to me. I'm going to react in a way that is relatively probably going to be negative, be it to do with prices going up in the UK. Okay. I understand some people are in dire straits, but how resourceful can you be? And I think for me, I think my life's been an amazing superpower that I've got more of that than I probably give it credit. The amount of adversity I've faced, and I'm not being brash about that. I'm just saying, I'm just spitting facts. I should be able to face any adversity that comes to me, but obviously I'm like everybody else. If it's something bad happens, you quickly internalize it as, well, I must be the fault. So you can quickly go from being something that's positive to negative, just like that. Mm. But the scientific stuff of the chemicals that obviously makes you angry, sad, depressed, frustrated, 30 seconds. What we need to get ourselves out of is replaying that on a loop. Oh, David made me angry. But David made me angry yesterday. Why am I angry now? About the same scenario. So if we can be able to almost unhook that, you would feel more positive. You would feel more motivated. You would feel more inspired because you're taking the emotion out of the event. And I'm only saying for the bad ones because that's most people want to do. So you don't get angry without obviously taking some accountability. So I've done this loads to reflect on us. Okay, if I'm angry with you, David, what have I done to contribute to make me angry? Because you can walk away from the situation and you'll be fine. I'm the one that's left with the emotion. But what have I done to obviously make myself get into that state? And what can I do to not react in a way that I don't want to? So it's what I want people to remember, and I'm going to wrap it up on this, is that perception. If you want to be positive, there's always going to be somebody that wants to tear you down no matter what. So it's reframing pretty much how you see the world, how you see yourself, how you see others, and not necessarily take it as, oh, I'm going to be able to achieve this tomorrow, because you're not. This is hard. This is obviously what we're talking about is mindset. Right? This is hard because, okay, you might want to change to today and tomorrow. What are the steps you're going to be able to do tomorrow to be a better version than you are today? And then that's how you progress. So I think I'll leave it on that.
Okay. And thank you for sharing your journey. It's amazing just to even hear that, because it's not just like we said at the beginning. It's not just about what you immediately see. It's what's underneath all those layers. So thank you for sharing your journey.
Oh, it's all right. Well, we can end on this one. Shrek. Shrek's like an onion.
Yeah.
So you can put that. Well, I can't remember. It's DreamWorks is Shrek.
Yeah.
if people, I obviously mentioned a book, kids' book. You look at nursery rhymes, you look at cartoons, you look at things that we would watch as kids. We watch them as adults. There'd be other meanings and other things under the surface. It meant that to me as a kid, but it's got a whole different meaning as an adult. And there's so much, a lot of good and bad things under the surface. Obviously, there's a lot of there's adult humor in kids' movies as well. But in terms of, there's a lot of life lessons in things that we already know and we already got access to. So, be it, I don't know, what's a good example of growing up? We use Peter Pan because that's probably a good one. Obviously, Captain Hook is made out to be the baddie, and I've seen one on social media. They flipped, I think it was YouTube. They flipped it and said, "What if Peter Pan was the baddie?" Because he doesn't want to grow up, does he? Thus, he wants to keep the kids never to grow up, and thus is Captain Hook not the good guy for trying to save them? Complete paradox and complete shift of things of change of. And I'm thinking, but could Captain Hook be one of the kids that escaped? Thus, he got older, and but I think from that, it's looking at things that you might have read as a kid, you've watched as a kid, and maybe okay, look at things, see if there's any bits of motivation I can stem from it. So say a film I was watching before Christmas, and I apologize for obviously making it a bit longer this episode, David, was King Arthur. And everybody's heard the story of King Arthur one way, shape or form of him pulling out Excalibur. But in this remake, I think it's a 2013 one with Jude Law and things like that. For me, the end of the movie where he thanks his uncle for making him and that's where the drive came from. You made me. Obviously, I've got one of those when one of my teachers in school, and you've got, the context. That for me is like, oh, wow, I hit home. So there's a lot of things you could look at, be it TV, film, books, and maybe look at it from a different set of eyes now as an adult, or even if you've got teenagers watching and listening, maybe look at some of those things again and look at it from a different perspective. I looked at it then as that. I see this now. This is what this was trying to teach me.
Well, thank you, James. It's been a pleasure talking to you today on the journey.
Thank you again, David, for having me on.
Thank you.
That was The Journey, hosted by Wise Words Imaging, hosted by David Hackett. Be sure to like, subscribe and listen to another journey coming soon.